My name is Ethan Carter, and for 25 years I believed my father chose not to know me. It was a Tuesday night in March when that belief finally cracked. I was sitting on my couch in my one-bedroom apartment in Columbus, half watching a video some stranger had posted about finding her biological father after 30 years apart. She was crying in the video, but she was smiling too, and something about that combination, grief and relief tangled together, made my chest ache in a way I didn't expect. I told myself I was just curious. That's what I told myself as I opened Facebook and typed a name I had never once searched for. Daniel Brooks. My mother had said that name maybe 4 times in my whole life, always the same way, like it tasted bad in her mouth. He didn't want you, Ethan. He didn't want either of us. That was the story. That had always been the story. There were 11 Daniel Brookses in Ohio. I almost closed the laptop. Then I saw a profile picture. A man in his early 50s, gray at the temples, standing on a dock somewhere with his arm around a teenage boy who had my jaw. My exact jaw. I'd seen it in the mirror every day of my life. I clicked on the profile before I let myself think about it. Attorney at a firm in Cleveland. Married to a woman named Emily. 2 kids listed, Mason and Olivia. The last public post was from Father's Day. A photo of him laughing at a barbecue. His shirt slightly too small around the middle, looking like a man with absolutely nothing to hide. My hands were shaking. I typed a message before I could stop myself. This is going to sound strange, but I think you might be my father. My mother is Laura Carter. My name is Ethan. I sent it and immediately felt sick. I set the laptop down, made coffee I didn't drink, and tried to convince myself nothing would come of it. Deadbeats don't answer, I told myself. That's what deadbeats do. They stay gone. 28 minutes later, my phone rang. Not a text. A FaceTime call from a number I didn't recognize, but the contact photo, because he'd apparently already found me too, was the same doc photo. I almost didn't answer. My thumb hovered over the red circle for a full 3 seconds. Then I answered, and a man's face filled my screen. And before I said a single word, he was already crying. "Oh my God," he said, his voice breaking apart in real time. "Oh my God, you're alive." I sat there frozen, phone shaking in my hand, and I didn't understand. Alive? Why would he say alive? "I thought you died before you were born," he said. "I have believed that for 25 years. I need you to understand what that sentence did to me. 25 years of one story, undone in 11 words. That's not possible," I said. It was the only thing I could get out. "I'm right here. I've been right here the whole time. Daniel." I didn't call him Dad. Not then, maybe not for a while. Wiped his face with the back of his hand and let out a laugh that sounded more like a sob. "I know. I'm looking at you. I don't know how to make sense of this yet either." Behind him I could see a kitchen, warm lighting, a corkboard cluttered with school photos and a calendar. A normal life. A life that had apparently been going on this whole time, 25 years, 3 hours away from mine. "Laura told me you didn't make it," he said carefully, like each word cost him something. "She called me in October, said there'd been complications, said the pregnancy ended. I was at a conference in Chicago. By the time I got back, she wouldn't answer my calls. Her parents told me to leave her alone, that I'd caused enough damage, that showing up would only make things worse for her. I was 24 and I believed them. I grieved you, Ethan. I grieved you for real." I didn't know what to say to that, so I said nothing, and he kept talking, faster now, like the dam had broken and he couldn't stop it even if he wanted to. I tried calling for months. Eventually, her number was disconnected. I wrote letters. I don't know if she ever got them. I told myself I had no right to push, that showing up uninvited to someone's grief wasn't fair to her. So eventually I stopped. I moved to Cleveland for a job 2 years later. I got married. He stopped himself, glanced somewhere off camera. "I have 2 other kids. Mason's 17. Olivia's 14. They don't know about any of this yet. I don't know how I tell them about any of this. I don't understand," I said, and my voice came out smaller than I meant it to. "My whole life, everyone told me you left. My mom, my grandparents. They said you didn't want a baby, That you disappeared the second she told you she was pregnant. Daniel went very still. I never disappeared, he said. I was told there was no baby to want. We stared at each other through two phone screens, 25 years of two completely different stories sitting between us, and I remember thinking with a kind of cold clarity, one of these stories is a lie, and I have spent my entire life inside it. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in the dark running the math over and over. My birthday, October. The timeline matched exactly what he'd described. There was no room in it for a mistake, no innocent misunderstanding I could talk myself into. Someone had built 25 years out of a lie, brick by brick, and I had lived inside it without ever once checking the foundation. I thought I understood my life by morning. I had no idea how much more there was to find. To explain what came next, I have to go back. I grew up in my grandparents' house in Zanesville until I was 9. Then in a rental 2 streets over once my mother could afford it on her hairdresser's salary. My grandfather, Pop, used to say Daniel Brooks's name like a curse word, usually after a couple of beers. That boy ran the second things got hard. Never even called to check if you two were alive. My grandmother was gentler about it, but no less certain. Some men just aren't built for fatherhood, sweetheart. It's not about you. It was never about you. My mother rarely brought him up at all, which somehow made it worse. When I was 12 and asked why I had no pictures of him, she got a look on her face like I'd slapped her and said, "Why would I keep pictures of a man who didn't want his own son?" I never asked again. I learned, the way kids learn things without being told directly, that the subject cost her something, and I didn't want to be the one making my mother pay it. I built an entire identity around his absence. In middle school, I told people my dad died in a car accident, because it was easier than explaining he'd simply decided I wasn't worth staying for. In high school, I stopped mentioning him at all. I watched my friends' dads show up to baseball games and felt something curdle in my stomach that I didn't have a name for yet. Not quite jealousy, something closer to proof. See, I'd think, this is what a father who wants his kid looks like. And I definitely don't have one. There were small strange moments over the years that I filed away without examining, the way you do with things that don't fit but don't seem important enough to chase. My mother flinching once when a coworker asked if I had my father's eyes. The fact that my birth certificate, which I saw exactly once for a passport application at 17, listed a father's name at all, Daniel R. Brooks, which struck me as odd for a man everyone swore had vanished before I was born, but I hadn't thought hard about it. You don't interrogate your own birth certificate. You just sign where you're told. My grandmother died when I was 20. At the funeral, an older woman I didn't recognize touched my arm and said, "You look so much like your daddy. God rest his memory." And someone quickly steered her away before I could ask what she meant. And I remember thinking that was a strange thing to say about a man everyone insisted was very much alive, just absent. I didn't think about it again for 5 years. I'm telling you all this because I need you to understand something. The lie wasn't one sentence. It was a structure. It was reinforced by people who loved me, repeated so many times and from so many directions that questioning it would have meant questioning my whole family at once. And I loved my mother. I still do, even now, even after everything. That's part of what made this so hard. I didn't go looking for the truth because I suspected anything. I went looking because I was lonely and curious and tired of being the only person at every holiday table without someone who shared my blood on the other side. I had no idea I was about to become someone else's evidence. I told my mother about Daniel 4 days later. I hadn't planned to. I told myself I wanted to understand the situation better first. But she called on Sunday like she always did, and I couldn't hold it in. I talked to my dad. I said, "Daniel Brooks. I found him on Facebook." The silence on the other end lasted long enough that I checked to see if the call had dropped. "Why would you do that?" she finally said. Not a question. A statement dressed up as one. "Mom, he says I died. He says you told him the pregnancy ended and I died before I was born. That man will say anything to make himself look better," she said, too quickly, the words overlapping like she'd had them ready. "I don't know what game he's playing, Ethan, but you need to be careful. People don't disappear for 25 years and then come back with a clean conscience for no reason." My grandfather, Pop, used to say Daniel Brooks's name like a curse word, usually after a couple of beers. That boy ran the second things got hard. Never even called to check if you two were alive. My grandmother was gentler about it, but no less certain. Some men just aren't built for fatherhood, sweetheart. It's not about you. It was never about you. My mother rarely brought him up at all, which somehow made it worse. When I was 12 and asked why I had no pictures of him, she got a look on her face like I'd slapped her and said, "Why would I keep pictures of a man who didn't want his own son?" I never asked again. I learned, the way kids learn things without being told directly, that the subject cost her something, and I didn't want to be the one making my mother pay it. I built an entire identity around his absence. In middle school, I told people my dad died in a car accident, because it was easier than explaining he'd simply decided I wasn't worth staying for. In high school, I stopped mentioning him at all. I watched my friends' dads show up to baseball games and felt something curdle in my stomach that I didn't have a name for yet. Not quite jealousy, something closer to proof. See, I'd think, this is what a father who wants his kid looks like. And I definitely don't have one. There were small strange moments over the years that I filed away without examining, the way you do with things that don't fit but don't seem important enough to chase. My mother flinching once when a coworker asked if I had my father's eyes. The fact that my birth certificate, which I saw exactly once for a passport application at 17, listed a father's name at all, Daniel R. Brooks, which struck me as odd for a man everyone swore had vanished before I was born, but I hadn't thought hard about it. You don't interrogate your own birth certificate. You just sign where you're told. My grandmother died when I was 20. At the funeral, an older woman I didn't recognize touched my arm and said, "You look so much like your daddy. God rest his memory." And someone quickly steered her away before I could ask what she meant. And I remember thinking that was a strange thing to say about a man everyone insisted was very much alive, just absent. I didn't think about it again for 5 years. I'm telling you all this because I need you to understand something. The lie wasn't one sentence. It was a structure. It was reinforced by people who loved me, repeated so many times and from so many directions that questioning it would have meant questioning my whole family at once. And I loved my mother. I still do, even now, even after everything. That's part of what made this so hard. I didn't go looking for the truth because I suspected anything. I went looking because I was lonely and curious and tired of being the only person at every holiday table without someone who shared my blood on the other side. I had no idea I was about to become someone else's evidence. I told my mother about Daniel 4 days later. I hadn't planned to. I told myself I wanted to understand the situation better first. But she called on Sunday like she always did, and I couldn't hold it in. I talked to my dad. I said, "Daniel Brooks. I found him on Facebook." The silence on the other end lasted long enough that I checked to see if the call had dropped. "Why would you do that?" she finally said. Not a question. A statement dressed up as one. "Mom, he says I died. He says you told him the pregnancy ended and I died before I was born. That man will say anything to make himself look better," she said, too quickly, the words overlapping like she'd had them ready. "I don't know what game he's playing, Ethan, but you need to be careful. People don't disappear for 25 years and then come back with a clean conscience for no reason. Then why does he have my birth certificate with his name on it? Why do I have his exact jaw? Why did Grandma Ruth's friend tell me I looked like my daddy at the funeral like he was dead, when you always told me he just left?" Another silence, shorter this time, but different in quality. "Careful. You're upset. This is a lot to process, and some stranger on the internet has clearly said something to upset you. I'm not doing this over the phone." Her voice had shifted into the tone she used at work, the one she used on difficult clients. Calm. Managed. "Come for dinner Thursday. We'll talk about it like adults." I agreed, mostly because some part of me still wanted her to have an explanation that made sense. One that didn't require every adult who raised me to have lied to my face for a quarter of a century. I spent the 3 days before that dinner doing something I'd never done before. Actually looking. I found my old baby book in a box at the bottom of my closet. The one my mother had given me at 18. For when you have your own kids someday. I'd never really opened it. On page 3, tucked into a plastic sleeve, was a hospital bracelet. Baby boy Brooks. Not baby boy Carter. Brooks. Underneath it was a folded piece of paper I almost missed. a printed hospital discharge summary, my mother's name on it, a date in October, and a single handwritten note in the margin in what I recognized as my grandmother's handwriting. Told D. Baby didn't make it, for the best, given everything. Don't ever let him find out otherwise. I sat on my bedroom floor and read that sentence maybe 20 times. For the best, given everything. Given what? What could possibly have made it for the best to tell a man his son had died? Whatever the real reason was, it clearly hadn't been simple abandonment. And it hadn't been my mother's secret alone. My grandmother had known, had helped, had written it down, calm as anything, like she was leaving herself a reminder to buy milk. I thought I was walking into Thursday's dinner to hear an explanation. I had no idea I was walking in with more evidence than my mother realized I had. My mother's house smelled like the pot roast she always made when she wanted to soften a hard conversation. I'd eaten that same meal after my grandfather's diagnosis, after she and her second husband split up, after I failed out of my first semester of community college. Comfort food as a negotiating tactic. I recognized it now in a way I never had before. I owe you context, she said before I'd even sat down. Not an apology. Context. I said nothing. I'd learned, over 4 days of thinking about almost nothing else, that silence got more out of her than questions did. Daniel and I were not in a good place when I got pregnant with you, she said. He wasn't ready. I wasn't ready. His mother, your grandmother on that side, made it very clear she thought I'd trapped him. There were things said, ugly things, about whether the baby was even his, which was a lie, but it was said in front of people, and I was 22 and humiliated and terrified. None of that explains telling him I died. She flinched at the word, actually flinched, and for a second I almost felt sorry for her. There was a period, she said carefully, where I genuinely thought about not continuing the pregnancy. My mother talked me out of it. But by the time I decided to keep you, I'd already told people at work I'd lost the baby to avoid explaining the situation with Daniel's family. It got complicated. And once his mother started saying those things, I decided he didn't deserve to know you at all. I decided that for you. I thought I was protecting you from a family that didn't want you. You decided that for 25 years, I said. Not one bad week. 25 years. Mom. You let me grow up thinking my father abandoned me. You let Pop call him a coward at every Thanksgiving. You let me believe I wasn't wanted, when the truth is you're the one who made sure he never got the choice to want me. I was protecting you, she said again, and I understood then that she believed it. That was almost the worst part. She wasn't performing innocence. She had built a version of the story where she was the hero of it, and she had been living inside that version for so long that my discovery felt, to her, less like exposure and more like betrayal. He has a family, I said. A wife. 2 kids. My half-brother and sister don't even know I exist. And whose fault is that? She snapped, and for the first time all night her calm cracked. Not mine. His, for building a whole life and never once looking for you. Don't you dare stand in my kitchen and make him the victim. He thought I was dead, I said quietly. You made sure of that. She didn't have an answer for that. She looked, for just a moment, like a woman watching a story she'd told herself for decades come apart in real time. And then the moment passed, and the composure slid back over her face like a curtain. I think you should go, she said. Come back when you're ready to hear the whole thing without looking at me like I'm a monster. I left without finishing dinner. In the car, I sat in her driveway for a long time before I could make myself pull out. She'd said the whole thing, which meant even now she hadn't told me all of it. I met Rachel Hayes 2 weeks later through a coworker who mentioned, almost offhand, that her cousin did family history research for a living, helping adoptees and estranged families track down documents, hospital records, old addresses. I hadn't thought of what I was doing as an investigation until Rachel used that word on our first phone call. I'm not a private investigator, and I'm not a lawyer, she told me over coffee near her office in Cleveland. I do title searches and probate research for the firm, and on the side I help people piece together family history when the paper trail's been deliberately confused. The slower than what you see on TV. I have to warn you, most of it is boring. Public records requests. Waiting. Dead ends. I don't care how boring it is, I said. I need to know what actually happened. She started with the hospital. My mother had given birth at St. Agnes Memorial in Zanesville, a fact I only knew from the discharge summary I'd found, since my mother had never once told me where I was born. Rachel helped me file a request for my own birth and medical records, which as the patient's now adult child I had some right to under Ohio law, though it took 3 weeks and 2 follow-up calls to get anywhere. While we waited, Rachel suggested something I hadn't considered. Find people who'd known my mother back then, before the story hardened into its final shape. Old stories are more honest before people realize they need defending, she said. I found Denise Alvarez through my mother's old high school reunion page. She'd been my mother's closest friend in her early 20s, and according to a comment thread from years back, had lived 2 doors down from my grandparents' house the year I was born. She agreed to talk to me over the phone, cautious at first, until I explained what I'd learned. "Oh, honey," she said, and I could hear something shift in her voice, something between relief and dread. "I wondered if this day would come." "You knew," I said. "You knew he didn't leave. I knew your mother told everybody a story that didn't quite match what I saw with my own eyes. I knew your mother told everybody a story that didn't quite match what I saw with my own eyes," Denise said carefully. "Daniel came by the house at least 3 times that fall, after your mother said the pregnancy had ended. I remember because your grandfather ran him off the porch the last time. Told him if he showed his face again, he'd call the police. Daniel wasn't screaming or making a scene. He looked like a man who'd been told his son died and just wanted somebody to explain it to his face. I always thought that was strange, a grieving man being treated like a criminal. But it wasn't my business, and your mother was going through something, and I didn't push." "Do you know why?" I asked. "Why they lied to him specifically, not just didn't tell him, told him I died?" Denise was quiet for a moment. "You'd have to ask your mother that. I have my guesses, but they're not mine to share, and I could be wrong. I'll say this much, it wasn't really about Daniel not wanting the baby. From what I remember, it was more about what your grandparents wanted people to believe about your mother." That last sentence sat in my chest for days. It wasn't really about Daniel. It was about what people believed about Laura. The medical records arrived on a Thursday, a thin manila envelope that felt heavier than it should have. Rachel came over to go through them with me, which I was grateful for, because I don't think I could have made sense of the terminology alone. There it was, my birth, healthy, 7 pounds 2 ounces, October, St. Agnes Memorial. No complications listed. No indication anything had ever gone wrong with the pregnancy at all. But there was something else in the file, something Rachel had to explain to me twice before I understood what I was looking at. A separate entry for months earlier, in June, an ultrasound visit, and a handwritten note from the attending physician. Patient distressed, requesting information on options given family circumstances. Referred to counseling per standard protocol. "This isn't about the baby's health," Rachel said gently, tapping the page. "Family circumstances. That's a specific phrase. It usually means something was happening at home. Pressure, conflict, sometimes worse. Not a medical complication." I thought about what Denise had said. It wasn't really about Daniel. It was about what people believed about Laura. "There's one more thing," Rachel said, and pulled out a second document from the envelope, one I'd requested almost as an afterthought. My grandfather's old employment file, which Rachel had tracked down through a pension records request, since he'd worked 30 years at the same manufacturing plant. Attached to it, oddly, was a note about a workplace incident from that same June. A written warning for confronting a coworker's son who'd been seen around the neighborhood with my mother, and words in the report I didn't expect. Inappropriate conduct alleged by the family, and my grandfather's name listed as the one who'd filed the original complaint, months before Daniel Brooks ever entered the picture at all. "Ethan," Rachel said slowly, "I think there might have been someone else, before Daniel. Someone your grandfather didn't approve of, and something happened that your family wanted buried. And I think when your mother got pregnant a few months later by a man they also didn't approve of, your grandparents weren't willing to survive a second scandal in the same year." I sat with that for a long time. It didn't feel like a movie twist. It felt like something sadder and more human than that. A family so afraid of what the neighbors would think that they'd rather erase a living father than risk a second round of gossip. So they didn't lie to protect me, I said finally. They lied to protect themselves. And Mom went along with it because she was 22 and scared, and it was easier to let her parents write the story than to fight them. I can't tell you her reasons for certain, Rachel said. I can only tell you what the paper shows. The rest you're going to have to get from her. I had one more conversation left before I could get there, and I wasn't ready for how much it would still hurt, even with almost the whole truth already in my hands. I found the last piece by accident, the way a lot of true things get found, not through a document, but through a person who'd been waiting 25 years for someone to finally ask. His name was Walter Kim, and he'd been my grandfather's supervisor at the plant, retired now, living 40 minutes outside Zanesville. Rachel found him through the employment file, and he agreed to meet me at a diner, which felt right somehow. A story like this deserved a Formica table and bad coffee. Your grandfather was a proud man, Walter said, stirring his coffee slowly, like he was deciding how much of this he owed me. Proud in the way that makes a man dangerous when he's embarrassed. There was talk that summer before you were born about your mother and a young man who worked delivery routes through the neighborhood. I don't know what was true and what was rumor, and frankly, son, it's not really my business or yours what your mother did or didn't do at 22. But your grandfather heard the talk and it about broke him. Small town, everybody knowing everybody's business. He went and made a scene, threatened the boy, got written up for it at work, the whole thing. And then a few months later she was pregnant, I said, by a different man. A good one, from what I understood. A young law student, serious about her, wanted to do right by the situation, from what your grandfather told me at the time, back before the story changed. Walter shook his head. But by then your grandfather couldn't stomach one more round of the neighborhood talking. One scandal that summer he could survive. A baby coming a few months later, everybody counting on their fingers and gossiping about which man it belonged to. He decided he wasn't living through that twice. I remember him telling me, real matter-of-fact over a lunch break, that it would be simpler for everyone if the young man just believed things hadn't worked out. Didn't sit right with me then. Doesn't sit right with me now, knowing you're sitting across from me alive and well 25 years later. So it was never about my father not wanting me, I said, mostly to myself. It was about my grandfather not wanting anyone counting months on their fingers. I think that's about the size of it, Walter said. Your grandmother went along because that's what wives did back then in that family. And your mother, I always got the sense she went along because she didn't have the strength left to fight her own father on top of everything else that year. Doesn't excuse 25 years of it continuing, but that's how it started. A scared, humiliated old man protecting his own pride, and a young woman too worn down to stop him. I drove home from that diner and didn't turn the radio on once. I finally had the whole shape of it. Not a monster, not a cartoon villain, just an ordinary, small, human kind of cruelty, the kind that starts as one desperate decision and calcifies over 25 years into a story nobody quite has the courage to undo. It didn't make what happened to me hurt less. If anything, it made it hurt in a new way because there was no clean villain to be angry at. Just people, flawed and frightened, who chose their own comfort over my father's grief and my own right to know him, year after year after year, long after any of the original reasons still applied. I called Daniel that night and told him everything. He was quiet for a long time on the other end of the line. I need to think about what I do with this, he finally said. But Ethan, thank you for not stopping until you found it. I spent 25 years thinking I'd lost you to something nobody could control. Finding out it was a choice somebody made. I don't know yet if that's better or worse. I just know I'm glad it's finally true instead of a mystery. I still had one conversation left. The hardest one. I asked my mother to meet me somewhere neutral this time. A coffee shop halfway between our two lives. No pot roast. No kitchen she could retreat into. She showed up already defensive, arms crossed before she'd even sat down. I know about Walter Kim, I said, no preamble. I know about the summer before I was born. I know Pop threatened someone at the plant and got written up for it. I know it was never really about Daniel not wanting me. It was about Pop not wanting a second scandal that year. The color left her face slowly, like watching a photograph fade. "You have no right." "I have every right," I said, and I kept my voice steady even though my hands weren't. "I'm not here to punish you, Mom. I'm here because I need to hear you say it. Not the version where you protected me. The real one." She was quiet for a long time, staring at the table between us, and when she finally spoke, her voice had lost the managed, careful quality it always carried. It sounded, for the first time in my life, like the voice of a scared 22-year-old. "There were rumors that summer, before I was even pregnant with you, and my father lost his mind over it. When I found out I was pregnant a few months later by a good man, a man who actually wanted to marry me, I was so relieved. Ethan, you have to understand, I thought this fixes it, this proves the rumors wrong. But my father didn't see it that way. He saw one more thing for people to whisper about on top of everything else that year. He told me if I let Daniel stay in the picture, everyone would spend the next 18 years doing math in their heads. He said it would follow me forever. He said it would follow you forever, growing up as that baby from that summer. So instead you made me grow up thinking my father didn't want me. You think that was better? I didn't think that far ahead," she said, and for the first time, she started to cry, not the composed almost tears from that first dinner, but something rawer. "I was 22 and my father was screaming at me in the kitchen, and I just wanted the screaming to stop. I told Daniel what my father told me to tell him, and then it was done, and it couldn't be undone, and every year that passed made it harder to imagine ever taking it back. By the time you were old enough to ask real questions, the lie had been alive longer than the truth had. I told myself I was protecting you from feeling like a scandal. But if I'm honest, really honest, which I haven't been in a very long time, I think somewhere along the way I also just couldn't face what it would mean to admit it. Not to Daniel. To you. I couldn't stand you looking at me the way you're looking at me right now. I've spent my entire life thinking I wasn't wanted," I said, and my own voice broke on the last word. "Every birthday, every Father's Day at school where I made up an excuse. Every time a friend's dad showed up to something and I told myself, that's what it looks like when a father actually chooses his kid. I built my whole idea of myself around being someone my father didn't want. And it was never even true." "I know," she said, barely a whisper. "I know, and I don't have anything that makes that okay. I'm not going to sit here and tell you I do. We didn't hug. We didn't have some tidy movie moment where everything mended in an instant." She reached for my hand across the table and I let her hold it for exactly as long as I could stand to, and then I pulled it back because I wasn't ready, and I told her that honestly instead of pretending otherwise. "I need time," I said. "I don't know how much. I'm not cutting you off. But I need time before I can be in a room with you and not think about all of it." She nodded, and for once, she didn't argue with me, didn't manage the conversation toward the outcome she wanted. She just let me leave. Forgiveness, I've learned, isn't a door that swings open all at once. It's more like a hallway with a lot of rooms in it, and you don't get to skip any of them just because you're tired of walking. My mother and I are still finding our way through that hallway. We talk now, most weeks, careful conversations that sometimes still end with one of us needing space. She started seeing a therapist on her own, which she told me about almost sheepishly, like she expected me to laugh at her for it. I didn't. My grandfather died 4 years before any of this came out, so I never got to ask him anything directly, and I've had to make my peace with that particular silence on my own terms. I think, in the end, I'm not angry at a dead man so much as I am sad for the version of my life that his pride cost all of us. Daniel told Mason and Olivia about me 3 weeks after that first FaceTime call, sitting them down at the kitchen table I'd seen in the background of our first conversation. Mason, it turned out, had questions before he had feelings, practical, careful, 17-year-old questions about how this worked and what it meant for their family, which I understood completely because I'd have asked the same ones. Olivia, 14 and apparently allergic to caution, texted me the same night through Daniel's phone. Is it weird that I'm just really excited to have an older brother? I cried reading that message in a way I hadn't let myself cry through any of the rest of it. Emily, Daniel's wife, was the one who actually made the first visit happen. She called me herself, before Daniel worked up the nerve, and said, "I've been a stepmother in reverse my whole marriage, missing a stepson I didn't know existed. I'd like to fix that if you're willing. I drove to Cleveland 2 weekends later. Mason showed me his car, which needed a new alternator, and somehow that turned into 3 hours in the garage that felt more like brotherhood than any conversation could have. Olivia made me sit through her entire dance recital video collection, unprompted, narrating every performance like I'd asked. Emily made a lasagna and cried a little in the kitchen when she thought I wasn't looking, and when I told her I'd seen, she just laughed and said, "Get used to it." I cry at everything lately. Daniel and I talk on the phone most Sundays now. Sometimes we don't talk about any of it at all. Just football or his cases or the used car I'm thinking about buying. Sometimes we do, and those conversations are slower, more careful, both of us still learning the shape of 25 missing years. He told me once that the hardest part wasn't the anger. It was grief for time that no apology could ever hand back to either of us. "I'm not going to pretend those years didn't happen," he told me one Sunday, months in. "I'm not going to pretend I'm not still angry some days about what was taken from both of us. But I'd rather spend the years I have left building something real than spend them being angry about the ones I lost. That part's up to you too, though. I'm not owed anything just because I finally know the truth. I think that's the part one needed to hear most. Not an ending where everything is forgiven and tidy. Just an honest offer from a man who'd earned the right to make one. I don't know exactly what my relationship with my mother will look like 5 years from now. Some days I think we'll get all the way back to something close. Some days I think there will always be a locked room between us that neither of us fully re-enters. Both of those things might end up being true at once, and I've stopped needing it to resolve into something simpler than that. What I do know is this. I spent 25 years believing I came from a man who didn't want me. I know now that I came from 2 people who wanted me very much, and a house full of fear that decided, long before I could speak for myself, that I wasn't worth the risk of the truth. I get to decide something different now. Every Sunday phone call, every weekend in Cleveland, every ridiculous dance recital video Olivia makes me watch, that's me deciding. Nobody else gets to write this part of the story for me anymore. That, more than anything else, feels like the truth I was actually looking for.